Lawyers of Reddit. What is the sleaziest thing you've seen another lawyer try to slip into a document? Story 1. In all my years, I've only seen 2 attorneys try to slip something through the cracks. The worst was a general practice guy dabbling in divorce. He wasn't slick, just arrogant enough to think no one was paying attention. In our state, divorce proceedings require updated financial statements almost every time you appear. They're detailed, line-by-line declarations of assets, debts, income, not a formality. A foundation. Every statement I received from his client painted a bleak picture. No money, no real assets, some debt, just a regular guy living modestly. But he didn't live like someone scraping by. The suit he wore in court alone probably cost more than his declared monthly income. His house, his car, his lifestyle, it all told a different story. So I pressed. At first, the attorney shrugged, claimed his client was being dishonest. "I just report what he gives me," he said, hands up like a hostage. But something was off. It wasn't just a client lying, it was too clean, too coordinated. We brought in a forensic accountant, dug deep, and then he made a mistake. A tiny one. Some document with his name in the wrong place. It led us straight to a trust fund he had set up for his client years ago. He was the manager. His signature was everywhere. Inside the trust, a few $100,000, stashed gradually in the years before the divorce. None of it had ever been disclosed. When I confronted him with it, he changed his entire story in less than a minute. Suddenly, he was shocked, betrayed. "I had no idea," he said to the judge, acting like the confidence just surfaced that morning. But it was too late. His name was on the account, his initials on the paperwork. His address is listed on the mailing records. He didn't just know, he had built the entire structure himself and hoped no one would notice it standing in the middle of the room. The judge didn't buy a word of it. After that, he could not recover. Every appearance after, every claim he made was greeted with skepticism, polite, restrained disbelief. He kept talking like a professional, but everyone in the room heard something different. Liar, cheat, busted. The rest of the case was a slow collapse. Every motion he filed got questioned. Every number triple-checked. He went from trying to win to just trying to salvage. The guy's career didn't end there, but it stalled. Story 2. It started with a probate file dropped on a desk in a quiet office on a Wednesday morning. Standard case on the surface-teased father, 2 adult children, a will, and a girlfriend young enough to have been mistaken for the family's new personal trainer. She'd only been around for about a month before the man died. Long enough to raise suspicions, not long enough to leave a footprint in his final wishes. According to both children, the last will had been updated just a few weeks before his death, and she wasn't in it. No mention, no carve-out, no final thank you or fond farewell. She didn't exist on paper. Then came the letter. It arrived by courier, sealed and smug. Not from the woman herself, but her attorney, the kind of name that reads like a Rolex ad and smells like high thread count fraud. The letter was addressed to both children. It was blunt, no dressing, no subtlety. It offered a deal. Change your testimony. Say the will wasn't updated. Say the girlfriend was meant to be included. In return, $7,000 and an all-expenses-paid trip wrapped in language that barely bothered to hide the bribe. The first to reconsider receives double, the letter read, but only the first. Then the threat. If you don't change your testimony, I will come after you with every resource an attorney has to make your life miserable. We read it in silence. There wasn't much to say. It was, without a doubt, the most openly corrupt thing we'd ever seen typed on firm letterhead. It left us boxed in. Reporting him to the bar during the case meant risking the appearance of strategy, trying to influence the outcome by undermining opposing counsel. Reporting him after risked looking petty, like we were licking wounds from a lost battle. Either way, the stench of it clung to everything. Then the siblings caved. They changed their testimony. Whether they actually got the money, nobody knows for sure. But the case tipped. The will was cast in doubt, and the court leaned in favor of the girlfriend. The estate, originally earmarked for a local charity, was rerouted into her bank account. The attorneys at our office weren't done. They called the sleazebag directly, asked him what the hell he was doing. What followed was something almost comedic panicked. A second letter went out that afternoon in the same typeface with a new tone. "I did not mean to indicate I would pay for your testimony, nor did I threaten. It's your fault if you thought I said those things." A masterclass in gaslighting, but written on official stationery. We sent both letters to the bar. Had to, even knowing full well how slow the machinery grinds, how many complaints end in nothing. I never found out what happened after that. The kids disappeared. The girlfriend moved on, probably richer, and the estate what was left of it was torn down into dry legal filings. Story 3. I wasn't a lawyer yet, just a plaintiff, sitting stiff in a courtroom in Sweden, watching a man I once called family try to twist reality until it cracked. The case was about child abuse and wife abuse. The man on trial, my father, had beaten my younger brother since the boy was 3. Not the kind of beatings that leave bruises only. The other kind, the ones that reshape how a child sees the world, how he sees himself. It wasn't just fists, it was words too. Constant dismantling of the boy's confidence, his self-worth. He lived in that house like a prisoner with no name, stripped down over 13 years until, finally, something snapped. An attempt. My sister found him just in time. That's when we dragged it into court. The father didn't deny everything. He just bent it, claimed it was discipline, parenting, structure. He's always been difficult, he said. Violent, defiant, I did what I had to. Then he brought in the document. A printed page, 2 signatures at the bottom, 2 child psychologists, and a claim so insane the air in the courtroom seemed to still when it was read aloud. They said the child was to blame for provoking the beatings, for being psychologically unstable, for forcing the father's hand. 2 professionals, allegedly neutral, had bought the fantasy. He'd taken the boy to therapy, for years dragged him. Really, and somewhere along the way, he'd poisoned the process, manipulated the narrative, wore the mask so well that even trained eyes couldn't see past it. He didn't just fool them, he convinced them. In that moment, I realized evil doesn't always come with a raised fist. Sometimes it's typed on letterhead, co-signed by people who should have known better. There was noise in the courtroom. A court reporter happened to be present that day, which is rare in Sweden. He wrote about it in detail. The article lit up conversations in legal circles, in universities, among psychologists. The backlash was sharp. That psychologist eventually had her license reviewed. We won the case, but the verdict didn't fix anything. The damage had already soaked in too deep. My brother never really recovered from those years, and I never forgot what I saw that day. Story 4. Scummiest thing I've seen another lawyer pull happened during a lease negotiation for a large undeveloped property. The company I work for was planning to lease it big piece of land, a lot of future value, and we were being careful. I was brought in early. Every revision, every clause, I had eyes on it, and it dragged 8 months of back and forth. Word changes, addendums, corrections, normal stuff, just slow. But we finally got there, final draft agreed upon. I send the lease over to the other party's attorney, along with a request for a final review and signature. Pretty standard. They shoot it back the next day. Signed. Looks clean at first. Signature page intact. No markup, no strikeouts, nothing flagged. They indicated everything was acceptable. I start preparing the executive summary for our leadership routine at that point. Our execs didn't read these contracts line by line. They relied on our breakdowns. And unless there was a red flag, it'd get signed automatically. But I always did one final read before handing it off. Habit. This time, it saved us. I start noticing language that feels different. Not wildly, but just enough. I open up our last clean copy and start comparing them side by side. And there it island edits. Small changes. Precise. All in their favor. Deadlines pushed slightly. Penalties softened. Option clauses twisted. Nothing earth-shattering in isolation, but enough that over the life of the lease, it would have cost us a lot. And none of it had been tracked, flagged, or mentioned. Up until that point, every revision had been marked. Every change was transparent. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. The guy had waited until the final hour, then slipped in his edits like a magician forcing a card. No red lines, no version control, just a new file with hidden landmines. I called him on it immediately. He played dumb. Oh, I must have opened an older version. He knew exactly what he did. We shut it down and restarted the process using a locked PDF version of our last confirmed draft. The lease eventually went through, but trust was gone. I flagged the incident in our internal systems. Made sure everyone knew the name. You only have to catch someone like that once. After that, their name's stained. Story 5. I work plaintiff side, so naturally, most people assume I'm in a constant, frothing war with defense counsel. Reputation is everything. It travels faster than paper and deeper than precedent. If you lie, fake, threaten, twist, or bluff too far past the line, you won't get blackballed officially. But the phone stops ringing. Offers stop coming. People take the long way around your cases. The sleaze? It happens, but it's rare. And when it does show up, it's usually not in documents. It's in the hallway conversations, the impossible to prove suggestions, the maybe we could do something about that witness talk. couched in just enough ambiguity to maintain plausible deniability. The problem for those people is simple. We all talk. I settled a case for $1 million yesterday. Legitimate class action. Real numbers, real damage. Defense knew it. We didn't need to posture or overinflate. But if I'd walked into that negotiation with a reputation for faking numbers or manipulating documents, it never would have happened. They would have called our bluff and dragged it out in discovery until the class wore thin or the funding cracked. That's the paradox people outside the legal system never quite get. We're in an adversarial system, sure, but trust still anchors the whole thing. I don't pretend every case is worth 7 figures. I don't send demand letters written like manifestos. I don't train clients to cry on cue or fake injuries. Why? Because the moment I do that, my credibility dies. And without credibility, you're just another barking dog in a parking lot full of bigger ones. People think the courtroom is where the fight happens, but most of the fight happens behind the scenes. Quiet, professional, strategic, and built entirely on the assumption that the person on the other side isn't lying through their teeth. So when someone does cross the line, when they try to slip something truly dirty through, we remember, we talk, and they slowly find themselves playing alone. Story 6. The kind of move that makes your skin crawl, not because it's clever, but because someone thought it might actually work. I was representing a mother in a custody case. She was in recovery alcohol, years behind her. But recovery, no matter how stable, always comes with shadows, and the father had custody. Every hour she got with her children had to be fought for. No room for error. No room for anything that could be twisted against her. We had a clear court order. Standard language. Neither parent was allowed to discuss the proceedings with the children. Reasonable. Kids don't need to be dragged through motions, affidavits, and visitation schedules. Let them breathe. One visit, her daughter asked when she'd see her again. Not prompted. Just a child asking a question her heart didn't know how to hold in. And my clients softly, carefully said, "Hopefully we'll find out soon once we go to court." Not bitterness, no blame, just a quiet, hopeful sentence. The kind of answer any parent would give in the middle of a storm they didn't ask for. Days later, the father cut off access. I got the call from the other lawyer. He said her words were a violation, that she'd breached the order by even mentioning the word court. That, based on that alone, the father would be withholding the children until further notice. There's a kind of fury that doesn't shout. I drafted a letter that day. Not a wild swing, just a scalpel. Every line measured. They backed down. The father relented. Maybe he knew. Maybe even his lawyer knew, somewhere under all the smoke, that trying to weaponize a mother's answer to a child's question was a level too far. But I still haven't forgotten that call. Not because it worked, but because it almost did. Story 7. I rented a unit in a big apartment complex, one of those places with a professional website, glossy brochures, and a rental office that smelled like fresh coffee and scented lies. During the lease signing, they gave me the option between a 3-month or 6-month term. The 3-month had higher rent. I was undecided on how long I'd stay, but then I noticed something buried in the lease. It said, either party may terminate this agreement by giving 30 days notice at any time. No asterisk, no condition, no special phrasing, just that. And I thought, well, why not sign the 6-month lease with the lower rent if I can still leave with 30 days notice? It didn't make sense, really, why they even bothered offering 2 options. But the lease was otherwise identical, and cheaper is cheaper. 3 months pass. The place is unbearable. Neighbors smoked constantly inside, outside, in the hall. The walls seemed to absorb it and exhale it directly into my apartment. And right next door, a bar that discovered its true purpose in life wasn't drinking, but screaming. At 5:00 a.m., somehow always 5:00 a.m., I wanted out. More than that, a friend's roommate had just left, and she had space for me to move in. So I typed up a 30-day notice, printed it out, walked it down to the front office. Easy. They read it and said I couldn't leave. Said I was on a 6-month lease. I pointed at the sentence in the lease. Either party may terminate. They looked at it, then looked at me like I was slow. That's just there so we can get rid of problem tenants, the woman said. Our lawyer told us it had to say either party because it's illegal to say only landlord. But that's not what it means. I told her, nicely at first, that this wasn't some legal magic trick. If you write either party, it means both sides can use it, not just one. If the law says the landlord can't have a special one-sided escape clause, then writing it to sound mutual doesn't make it yours exclusively. That's not a workaround, it's the law. She said she'd have to talk to the owner and get back to me. She didn't. A week passed. I called my cousin, who's a lawyer. He looked over the lease and got quiet, said he was honestly confused why this was even an issue. There was nothing binding me to 6 months other than the title, 6-month lease. That was it. The document had no clause requiring a full-term stay, and I'd already done what the termination clause said, 30 days notice. Delivered, acknowledged. He told me they probably knew exactly what the lease said. They were just bluffing, hoping I'd be too nervous or confused to challenge it. Told me if I wanted to move, go ahead but do it smart. Email them weekly, confirm I was moving, offer to let them show the unit, be overly reasonable. That way, if they tried anything later, I'd have a clean record. So I did exactly that. Week 1 nothing. Week 2 nothing again. So I stopped by the office, asked about the notice. She glanced up, irritated, like I was interrupting something important. We talked to our lawyer. We'll be showing your unit next week. I paused. So, you know I'm leaving at the end of the month, and you know I'm not breaking the lease. She sighed like she was doing me a favor. Yeah, you're off the hook, sweetie. Like I was some scammer pulling one over on her. I moved out at the end of the month, left the place spotless. Expected some kind of petty deduction from the deposit, but to my surprise, they returned every cent. Story 8. It started as a simple estate case own heir, one asset, no drama on paper. The kind of file you expect to resolve cleanly. Father passes, adult son inherits, sell the house, close it out. No trust webs, no long-lost siblings, no mystery beneficiaries. The house was held in joint tenancy between the father and the son. Upon the father's death, ownership passed smoothly. No contests, no delay. But the estate still needed attention paperwork, maintenance, a few filings. That's where the attorney came in. He pitched himself as helpful, efficient, claimed he'd get everything ready to sell, said he knew people, said he could move things along faster than probate ever would. What he really meant was, I see an opportunity. He secured not 1, but 2 mortgages on the house using his client's name and the estate as leverage. Also managed to pull a cash advance under the banner of probate acceleration. Said it was all standard, legal, necessary. A few thousand here to clean the place. A few thousand more for painting, staging, repairs. And then the real spending started. Vegas. Not quietly either, no subtle siphoning, no fake contractor invoices. Full-on trip, hotels, strippers, bars, bottle service, all of it. He took the air with him, blew through most of the money over a weekend, had the receipts, filed them as estate expenses. They're in the court records line by line. Champagne, limousine, adult entertainment billed as client morale. When the money ran out, the attorney vanished. Didn't return calls, didn't show up to court, didn't answer letters from the heir or the mortgage holders. Eventually, even the house went quiet. Months later, the heir was found wandering the streets, looking for food in trash bins. His ex-wife got the call. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but she went to the house anyway. What she found didn't resemble a home anymore. Empty rooms, no furniture, trash in corners. The man she used to be married to, curled up on the floor, barely clothed, surrounded by filth. He wasn't just hungry, his brain was broken. Years of drinking had crushed his cognition, and now he couldn't count change or understand a calendar. Doctors assessed him and gave a grim scale his mental functions somewhere between a 1st and 3rd grader. She filed for conservatorship, not because she wanted to, but because no one else would. Someone had to take control. Someone had to stop the bleeding. By then, the house was in foreclosure. The mortgages were unpaid. The cash advance? Gone. No assets, no savings, no backup. The attorney? Disbarred. Tried, convicted, and now sitting in prison. $200,000. That's all it was. Not enough to buy a future, just enough to ruin a man's life and tie the wreckage to court filings for everyone to see. Story 9. I was buying a house. Thought everything was locked in, just waiting on paperwork and signatures. Then, the AC unit got raided. Some genius had gone out there and stolen parts off it, which I only found out because I was keeping tabs on the property like any sensible future homeowner would. I flagged it immediately, told the sellers this needed to be fixed before inspection. Basic stuff really, their house, their problem. So they sent someone out to handle it. By handle it, I mean they just removed the entire unit, ripped it out to keep the rest from getting stolen, which, odd solution, but fine. I figured it would go back in before closing. Then we hit a hiccup. Something small bank delay, paperwork weirdness, can't even remember now, but it pushed our closing date back. And to handle that, you signed this tiny little extension agreement. Just a couple pages, nothing dramatic. Most people don't look too hard at it. but I did. Buried in the extension language was a clause tucked in like a little landmine saying that once the new AC unit was installed, I'd be responsible for any damage or vandalism that might happen to it from that moment forward, even though the house still wasn't mine. Let me just say that again. I hadn't signed the closing papers, I hadn't been handed the keys. But if someone took a crowbar to the new AC unit the night before I signed, I'd be on the hook for repairs. LOL. No. I took a pen to that clause like it owed me money, crossed it out, wrote a big fat nope, initialed the change, and sent it back. And guess what? They accepted it. No argument, no fuss, just a silent acknowledgement that they'd tried it and I'd caught it. Story 10. It started with a house, half of it technically. When my grandmother died, her property didn't go entirely to my father. Half went to her longtime partner, a man she never married, but lived with for years. That detail became important. The will was precise, not vague, not open to interpretation. When the partner died, the house would be sold, and my parents would receive 50% of the sale, not of the profits, not of whatever remained after someone else's decisions. That man outlived her, and in the years that followed, he made a mess of things, mortgaged the house, collected debt like it was a hobby. But here's the part. He didn't seem to understand his half was his. His debts were his, and when he died, those debts didn't get to chew into our half. They just dissolved into whatever scraps were left from his share. His family from abroad didn't like that. When he passed, they expected something to be waiting for them. Instead, they found a financial crater and a house that was half theirs to lose. They hired a lawyer, someone from their country, probably a family friend or someone who'd handled visas once and suddenly became an estate expert. He fought everything, argued like we'd stolen the place. He claimed we altered the will, falsified documents, lied outright, said our lawyer couldn't possibly know what was in the original will because he hadn't been the one present when it was written. Our lawyer didn't raise his voice, just reached into the file, pulled out a sealed envelope and said, "We have the original document, sir, if you're interested." Silence. Then they tried to argue ownership itself, said the house wasn't even half ours. Our lawyer smiled again, asked them to wait, logged into the county registry, and pulled up the ownership deed in front of everyone. Silence again. After that, the wind left their sails. They knew they had nothing, but they'd burned the bridge so thoroughly accusations, insults, outright stupidity, that no one in our family cared anymore. There was no attempt to negotiate, no chance to meet in the middle. Any goodwill we might have had? Gone. Our lawyer handled the sale, sat through it, made sure everything was by the book. When the payment came through, he made sure it was split immediately. No delays, no excuses. We took our share and walked away without looking back. They could have talked, could have explained, maybe even found a bit of understanding or support. But they hired the wrong man and came in swinging with empty fists. Story 11. I briefly worked at a firm that operated with the kind of ethics you'd expect from a 3-card Monte table on a sidewalk. Second week in, the estate and trust's guy well-known, high-billable, polished, was leaving. Everyone knew. The official story was vague. Some said he botched a high-profile account. Others said he was sick of the partners, especially one who ran the office like a farm animal in heels. But none of that was the worst part. He sent out letters to a few of his longtime clients, letting them know he was leaving at the end of the month. A clean break. Professional. Discreet. He wasn't poaching them, just notifying them in case they wanted to follow. The firm's response? Lie. One of the senior admins pulled us all aside and laid it out flat. If anyone calls about him, you say he's on vacation. That was the script. Vacation. Not sick, not unavailable, not transitioning vacation. Every day for nearly a month. Clients were calling constantly. Not casual calls either. These were people dealing with deaths in the family, major trust disbursements, will modification shavy, personal stuff. They weren't phoning in to say hi, they needed him. And we were told to smile and pretend he was sipping Mai Tais on a beach somewhere. Some clients got upset. A few pushed. One even asked for his return date. We'd say he should be back soon, like he was just wrapping up a little getaway, not packing up his office between meetings. The entire charade was built around fear. The partners were terrified that if clients knew he was really leaving, they'd follow him, which they probably would have. Not because he was perfect, but because he didn't lie to them. Not like this. What the firm didn't understand was simple. Once you lie to a client, especially about who's handling their money, their wills, their estates, they don't forget. You've made yourself radioactive. And sure enough, when he opened his new office the following month, plenty of those clients showed up there. not because he asked them to, but because they realized who had integrity and who didn't. Story 12. The story circulated like wildfire through the halls of the law school. A lawyer licensed, credentialed, and opportunistic to the bone approached a niche website, the kind that tracks piracy through IP logs and server analytics. The site catered to adult content, not just adult, but boy-themed content legal for production and distribution, but designed to toe the line hard enough to make people sweat. The site had been pirated often, and the owners wanted action. The lawyer saw a window. He offered to send demand letters, 3, 0 to 5, 0 per violation, or else the violator would be sued. The site agreed. Legal threats, filed properly, backed by IP logs. It was, on the surface, legitimate enforcement. What made it predatory was the layer underneath. He wasn't just sending out a few notices. He began filing hundreds of motions for court orders, requesting the release of subscriber information tied to IP addresses. It was like watching a machine activate, dozens per day. Each motion clean, professional, justified with technical evidence. Judges signed off without hesitation. Rubber stamp process. Until one judge paused. He started digging. Not deep, just enough to see the names behind the IPs, the addresses, the mail recipients, the households. These weren't reckless downloaders in anonymous dorms or bachelor apartments. They were married couples, families, kids in the house, mortgage suburbs. And that's when it clicked. The lawyer wasn't just enforcing copyright law. He was wielding shame like a scalpel. The content might have been legal, but the label it carried was enough to implode a marriage or destroy someone's life in a community. So the lawyer's letters didn't just threaten financial consequences. They carried the implicit promise of exposure. He knew exactly what he was doing. The demand letters were simple. Pay up or prepare to be sued for piracy. The letterhead was sharp. The case law was real. But between the lines, the message was clear pay, or your spouse finds out what you've been watching. And they paid. All of them. No lawsuits were ever filed, not a single one. Because they didn't need to be. The threat worked. Fear did the heavy lifting. Shame made the payments roll in. In the span of just a few weeks, the lawyer pulled in somewhere between 400, 0, and 500, 0. Blackmail? Not technically. The piracy happened. The evidence existed. The settlements were voluntary, legally sound, structurally intact. But ethically? It was a parasitic masterpiece. Preyed on guilt, secrecy, and the terror of public exposure. Weaponized the assumption that no one wants their darkest curiosity laid bare. Word eventually got out. The judge who paused didn't ignore what he found. There was no smoking gun, no one moment that took the whole thing down. But the volume dropped. The filing slowed. The letters stopped. Quietly, it all went away. No disbarment. No court ruling. Just silence. Story 13. It was a plain lot. Rural. With a wide cement slab and a metal tool building on the edge. My family had owned it for years. The kind of place people use for storing tractors, engines, or building supplies, not for living in. About 50 feet away sat the actual house, modest but livable. When we sold the property, it was clear what was what. The lot was sold as is, and the title explicitly said the structure wasn't a home, wasn't zoned as a home, and wasn't meant to be lived in. No ambiguity, no traps, no fine print. Then the buyer got creative. She bought the place, looked at the slab, apparently decided that building from scratch was too hard, and started trying to convert the metal tool building into her home. No insulation, no plumbing, no infrastructure. Just 4 walls, a roof, and bad decisions. When reality hit, when she ran into zoning issues and couldn't get the permits she needed, she sued my dad. The argument? That he sold her a house that wasn't actually a house. Let me be clear. She tried to sue over the shop, the same one clearly labeled in the contract, title, and listing as not being a house. It would have been funny if it hadn't cost us nearly 40-0 to fight it. And then came the real kicker. The first judge assigned to the case was quitting. Like, mid-exit, burned out, bags packed, already mentally out the door. He didn't even look at it. No hearing, no reading, no due diligence. Just rubber stamped it forward like he was checking out of a bad hotel. So the case went to court, on paper, for months. The next judge, the one who actually had to pick up the pieces, took one look at the file and basically said, "How the hell did this even get this far?" He threw it out. Instantly. Her argument wasn't just weak, it was non-existent. The documentation was airtight. She just didn't like the outcome of her own decision and decided to take a legal swing at the people who'd been clear from day one. We won. but not before it drained our time, energy, and a pile of cash we'll never get back. Story 14. This happened years ago, but I still think about it whenever someone asks why I'm so meticulous, why I triple-check documents even after they've been finalized. It was right before permanent orders in a divorce case. Negotiations dragging, nerves frayed, everything supposedly squared away. Every issue hashed out, every number beaten into shape. Then I got the final version faxed over from opposing counsel. Standard practice, just a formality, right? Except this wasn't just a clean copy of our agreement. This was her version of it. Quiet edits, surgically placed, each one helping her client, each one small enough to miss if you weren't looking. And she was counting on that. I'd heard about her reputation, smart, polished, but slippery. So I didn't read the document straight through. I printed her version and laid each page over the corresponding page from the last confirmed draft, held it up to the light, watched the margins like a hawk. It didn't take long. A change here, another there. A reworded sentence that tilted the financials in her client's favor. A term redefined to shift obligation. Not massive changes, but targeted, precise. The kind you don't notice until they cost you thousands or leave your client on the hook for something they never agreed to. I called her, pointed out every edit. Her silence on the other end wasn't long, but it was loud. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain. Just paused, then said she'd send the correct version. Good thing I caught it. If we had signed off and filed, and then realized what she'd done, we'd have had to explain to a judge why we didn't read what we signed. And judges don't like hearing you got outfoxed. They don't sympathize with professionals being sloppy. That moment etched something deep into how I practice. Some lawyers, plenty of them, you can work with. You make a deal in the hallway, and it stands. No drama, no tricks. They keep their word. You hash out a compromise, and both sides walk away knowing the lines were respected. But others? You photocopy. You compare. You read every line twice and still expect a third layer of varnish somewhere. Because once you see someone try to slip edits through the back door, you stop believing in the handshake, and you start holding everything up to the light. Story 15. Not a lawyer, but one definitely had to sign off on the damage. My mom died when I was 4. Dad remarried when I was 7. He died when I was 10. That left 6 of us kids orphaned in one swing. I was the youngest. The only adult left was the woman who'd been our stepmother for 3 years. We had a house, some money, nothing extravagant, but enough. Dad had planned well life insurance sized for 6 kids, college-age horizon. It was meant to cover us until we were grown, until we could survive on our own. And then came the legal storm. Because the marriage had lasted over a certain number of years, just barely she was entitled to a slice. By law, not because of what she did, not because she raised us, just because she was there long enough to meet the threshold. 1/3. 1/3 of everything meant to raise 6 parentless kids, automatically hers. I was kept out of the details, being too young, but I remember the tension. I remember the meetings, the hushed arguments behind doors, the way my older siblings aged overnight. What should have been grief turned into negotiations. Lawyers were involved. Probate dragged. Every delay cost us something: time, money, peace. Eventually, the court granted her the 33%. Legal minimum. Fair on paper. Nothing about it felt fair. And then she came back. She offered a deal give her 40%, and she wouldn't appeal. Said if we didn't, she'd drag it out for another 2 years. More hearings, more fees, more erosion. She wasn't just draining the account, she was leveraging the time we didn't have. We gave her the 40%. She signed, took her share, vanished. Never heard from her again. Not a letter, not a call, just gone. 6 orphans. She came in for 3 years and walked away with nearly half. That was the trade. Love wasn't part of it, just timing. And a lawyer who knew how to twist a knife without getting red water on their hands.